these standards start to evolve, Web3 really coalesces around the world and like there's mass adoption, the scale will outscale hyperscalers. The reach will outscale hyperscalers. Like it'll be closer to the customer in almost every way. You're going to leave the best job in your career so far for the most amazing opportunity that it's ever going to come across your desk. And so for me, it was like a no-brainer. We just agreed, yeah, this is where I want to be.
Daniel Baker is CTO and one of the co-founding team at Qubit9, a company disrupting the cloud sector by harnessing the power of decentralized technology. Now, they're going into a space that has the biggest of players, and to disrupt it, you need the smartest and best team and to be led by some brilliant co-founders. And Daniel absolutely fits that description. As you can see from this episode, we dig into some really complex topics that he explains brilliantly. But for me, what I got out of this chat was an insight into the mentality and mindset of Daniel. And you can see why he's got to where he is throughout his illustrious career. His work ethic and discipline was something I really admired and something I'd love to emulate myself now and in the future. I learned so much. I'm someone in my 20s that really wants to build my business and really crack on. And I think my conversation with Daniel shows me what it really takes to achieve so much in the long term. I hope you feel the same way once you've listened to this too. So, enough from me. Without further ado, I'm Alex Bloisey, and this is the Building Our World podcast. So Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the show. Qubit9 and this particular use case for like decentralization, basically on the cloud storage side, is something that really kind of made sense to me and resonated with me. Now, obviously, I'm not a technical person, but I work with a lot of tech companies and I see people complaining about high cloud costs, storage costs, and all that comes with it. And when I saw this, I just thought it was really interesting. It cut through all the noise that's come with a lot of this like blockchain and decentralized technology. But it might be better to come from you if you could explain what Qubit9 is doing and what you're offering.
Sure. Thanks for having me on the show. First of all, it's really great to help participate and give back to the community, even if it's about thought leadership around what we're trying to do. But yeah, so Qubit9, our goal is to bring decentralized services to the enterprise world. And part of the problem in the past has been Web3 has been built by Web3 for Web3. No one's really had an enterprise B2B focus on this. And so to quote other tech leaders that have come before me, we want to meet the customers where they're at. So essentially, what's important for us is to take the best of breed in decentral offerings, bring them together in a platform for our B2B users. It's going to be a long journey. It's going to be a difficult journey. There's lots of problems to solve along the way. The most logical thing for us was to start with storage. Storage is where you have your data. We can move data around relatively easily. We could do compute where the data is actually living. And it's a relatively simplistic problem to solve in the decentral world. Storage, making sure it's secure and encrypted, that you can retrieve it, that you can repair it, versus certain types of compute as well. So we've launched decentralized object storage. It's been available to the public for a couple of months now. We're promoting that to general availability relatively soon with a super strong suite of features that really make our decentralized storage offering enterprise class, enterprise grade. And all file operations are done on ISO certified data center platforms. So we've got a large decentral network of this type of grade of networking nodes as well. So yeah, that's the goal, to build a platform starting with storage.
Perfect. So if I just get this right, did you see the problem of storage and we're thinking of solutions to solve that, and decentralization was one of those? Or are you coming it from the sort of, you see decentralization can solve many problems, so you almost were coming with the solution and finding a problem, or was it the other way around? If that
I
makes
think
sense.
it's a bit of both. So we saw the potential of decentralization for scale and different types of services and compute, like a heterogeneous compute environment is fine. I've been dealing with that in many data centers in the past. And so bringing all of these types of compute or even just the scale of compute and having a community that optimizes for these types of compute as well is far outweighs anything we could do centrally or by ourselves. Having a strong community there that's optimizing for, say, flash storage, so you're getting this hot object storage. They could be optimizing for CDN if we have a CDN like service on our network in the future, so content distribution. And the community will find, like, we can build best of breed and make the best framework for that to happen, but the community will find better ways to do that. There'll always be smarter people outside our organization in general than inside, and we want to take advantage of that community effect as well. And so we approached it that, okay, the internet is changing, it's fundamentally flawed, it's in the hands of a few central billionaires, if I may say. And what we want to do is start to take advantage of the scale that's actually out there. And so, sorry, Alex, I just lost your connection there. Was it you or was it
Yeah,
me?
I think it was both of us, but it seems like we're back.
Yep. Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Yeah. So taking advantage of that scale and not having all of that sort of centralized compute from the hyperscalers, the big five.
yeah,
So taking advantage of that scale was one of the things, and then looking at the types of things we could do decentralized was the second layer. So first scale, then decentralization, and then looking at the things that fit enterprise use cases. And so then the top of that pyramid was storage. Storage is needed for any type of compute. So that's why we started with storage. And then looking at it from the other way, saying, okay, what can we do better in storage that's being done in central? Customers want the same enterprise look and feel. They want the same types of APIs. We take a really dogmatic approach of saying one line of code to make the change. So if you're using AWS, you should just be able to change your endpoint and start using us, which is the
yeah,
case today. So little to no technical barrier of entry for using our product in comparison to what you're used to. We'll start to put other facilities on top that allow Azure users and GCP users to just switch to us as well and use their old command structure and still be able to get the same experiences they're used to. So these were really important for us to make it easy for customers to connect to us in a familiar way that
mm,
does not impact them. So the cost of change is really low. And then, of course, when you have a decentralized network, there is obviously a very clear cost benefit to the customer as well.
yeah,
These things, it's not capital expense for us to purchase these things, these nodes. They're incentivized through their own willing participation on token economics. We want to make sure that that's also healthy for the community. We'll have a community manager and a product manager solely focused on that side of the business as well. But the other thing is, as well, when you start to look at security, it can be inherently better depending on the way you want to approach how you're solving your storage solutions as well. So compromising a central storage location means you have access to all the storage.
yeah.
Compromising a single node in a decentral network means you only have access to part of a single file.
Perfect. And one thing that I really wanted to pick up on there was you wanted to make it easy for the end user to just switch over, and
Yep.
that's one thing I've seen. And obviously, with what we do, we scour a lot of Web3 companies, and we see a lot of what's out there. And
Mm-hmm.
one thing that's always struck me is the barrier to entry with some of the stuff that's on offer in Web3 is massive. You have to know so much about the space that it's just not suitable for mass adoption. So it's interesting that you came to it from that point where you make it super easy to switch over, like a plug and play, and you're ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, customers of AWS don't care what hardware is used, what
Yeah,
hypervisors are used, how you're doing orchestration. They don't. They want the service to work the way they expect it to work. Like walking in and turning on a light switch in a room, it should just function.
yeah,
And so we took the same approach from day zero, essentially, before we even started writing code. This was part of our tenets on how we wanted to build this platform and make it really easy for users to make the change. The other thing is signing up is as easy as clicking with single sign-on with your Google account, for example, and you can just pay fiat, right? You don't have to have a wallet. You don't have to
Mm.
buy crypto. All of these barriers on the UX side as well are just removed. So you come to our website, you click in, you make your account, you can start using it in the UI immediately, drag and drop stuff, super easy. Or you can go out to the command line and even use familiar tools like AWS's own CLI version 2 you can use with our platform. It's backwardly compatible. It's fully function ready for that.
Love that. Yeah, it's that sort of that middle ground, because one of the big things I've seen with Web3, and I'd love to get your take on it as well. You've got people who are absolutely evangelical about it. They have decentralized in all aspects of their life. They will have their wallet. They want decentralized governments and everything like that. And then there's people, I think, on the complete other side that are absolutely against it. Now, like most things, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, and maybe Qubit 9 and what you're doing, and maybe how you're selling it to the customer is incorporating that.
Yeah, I work with a lot of these people through my network, and they
Mm,
are some of the smartest people I've ever had the pleasure of being in the room with. There's a whole, like, I'm involved in a working group for protocol labs as well. And so really smart people solving really complex problems. And of course, it's an open source community, so anyone can contribute and give back to what they're doing, can take advantage of what's being built, integrate the platform. It's really nuanced, like you said, in the way that you take your approach to what you're solving. Um, they don't have the focus on enterprise use cases, and in
yeah.
some of the scenarios or the companies they're working in, they don't need to. But then someone outside looking in says, "Well, that's not applicable to me. This is not good," and so on and so forth. So for us, almost like a curator of these types of services and building that bridge from Web3 back to the enterprise Web2 world, and
Mm,
presenting these amazing solutions being built by ourselves and other people, to say, hey, look, this is storage. And by the way, we can do compute on top of that storage, and we don't have to move the data around. We can do it where it lives. So we just save time here, and we can do it for a tenth of the price of AWS,
mm,
or at the same scale or bigger in some cases. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The perception is people are left and right of this, but there's a blend all the way through, and with very valid reason.
yeah, absolutely. And I think over time, as the space evolves and more players come into the space, maybe it will merge a little bit. But it's hard, I think, to cut through the noise of, because all the mainstream headlines are about crypto and FTX and all this
Yeah,
sort
they
of
are.
stuff, and
Yeah, that's
all
right.
gets lumped together.
Yeah.
Um, so one thing before we kind of move on to your journey, and I really want to get to know about yourself as an entrepreneur, but in terms of the Web3 space itself, what do you think is needed for it to reach this kind of mass adoption level, and what do you think is holding the space back right now?
I kind of look back to, like, I've been through this journey many times on evolution of what a platform should look like, or what a data center should look like, or how applications should be built. Having been involved back in the day with Iron Mountain, running lots of data centers around the world, including cloud data centers, bringing them into hyperdense compute through computer blades, then bringing them into the virtualization world, which they hadn't even heard of how virtualization works and didn't understand it. And there was even opposition in those days to virtualization. And then taking the next step beyond virtualization and getting into containerization, and then microservices architecture, and starting to build those types of solutions. Again, the same types of resistance and not understanding how that should be. And so going through these process, and now obviously Kubernetes is dominating that market. From my last role, where I was working at Mesosphere / D2iQ, doing just that. Like, we were doing Apache Mesos, or the DCOS program, and then we were working deeply with Kubernetes,
Mm,
like not on top of Kubernetes, building an opinionated stack doing some really amazing stuff at scale there for some names that I can't mention in a podcast, but really big global customers. Um, these things take some time. There's like the adoption lag, which is pretty clear. Like people don't understand it, and then some some key thought leaders put it into their organizations, and then they start to write blog posts about it and why it changed everything for them, and so on and so forth. And then it starts to slowly creep into the mass adoption mode. But one of the things that helps that is the community that takes it up starts to
Mm.
develop standards, and these standards and other services can start to be relied upon. And so it's like the Andreessen Horowitz flywheel that when you get the developer community engaged now, they start to contribute back into what you're building, especially if you're doing something that's an open platform or open source. That people realize, hey, we don't have an egress point here on this service, and we have to build something like that, or we don't have standards on APIs, or we need to extend how APIs work and make this other layer. And so
Mm.
these sorts of things generally get solved by lots more people contributing, and these things then become definitions or standards that then can be used by more people, right? Rather than
Perfect.
having to put this thing together yourself all the time. So now
Yeah.
when I look at the Web3 world, it's slowly starting to, I think a lot of the people I'm talking to are starting to think this way. I was just at the Web Summit in Lisbon a few weeks ago, and talking to some, again, really smart people in this space are starting to think, hey, we need some standards, or we need an API server, which is sort of against what we think of decentralization, but we at least
Yeah.
need standards here in certain areas. And so I think once these standards start to make sense in the Web3 world, mass adoption will become really, really prevalent in what we're doing in this iteration of the internet and the cloud. Um, our goal here at Qubit 9 is to help promote that type of standard.
Mm.
So not only giving familiar standards of the Web 2 world back to the customer, but to think about, okay, if we're building something on the back end, let's publish a standard, let's try and get buy-in from the community, and let's make sure this is improved by other input, but at least we can all work to a standard. Even if it's not perfect, we've got a standard, right? And these are sorts of things we want to look at too as we evolve and grow our product platform.
Perfect. With that, is there a slight difference with the decentralization aspect of maybe adopting technologies in the past? I mean, please tell me if I'm being an absolute dummy here, but was there like back in the day, if there was a framework or whatever, a tool, and say Google was using it or Facebook or Uber, um, was there a case that then obviously it would catch on and other companies would use it? As with decentralization, maybe this big tech wouldn't adopt that, so it'll have to be adopted in a different way, if that makes sense.
Uh, kind of. I guess like
Mm.
a lot of big companies like so Netflix, Airbnb, and Uber have all outsourced really amazing tools to the open source community,
Okay.
and people have just snapped them into their solution stack because they solve a really specific use case that's amazing. Like, wow, this tool is fantastic. Let's use it. It solves for my use case here, or it solves a problem in my stack. So I think these things will always happen. Kubernetes is actually an example of that. I think Google is focusing on Borg or something like that, which is their internal orchestration. But I think Kubernetes was open sourced because of its capabilities, and look what the community's done to improve it. And so that's a case of, yeah, big tech invented something, and then they open sourced it, and then it just went bigger and
Yeah.
better. And I think in the hyperscale space, it's probably going to be the other way in the decentral world. There's a lot of people who are really anti-central cloud, hyperscalers, big tech, in their mindset or in how they want to code or how they think the internet should work. I'm pretty agnostic on what the best solutions for building our platform. So I'll take from both worlds and put it together to make the right solution to fit the use cases we're solving for our customers. But eventually, I think the hyperscalers or the central clouds will have difficulty competing in that decentral world.
Mm.
I think if these standards start to evolve and Web3 really coalesces around the world and like there's mass adoption, the scale will outscale hyperscalers. The reach will outscale hyperscalers. Like it'll be closer to the customer in almost every way. and it'll offer more opportunities for a community of potentially millions of people to optimize how this network works. And I think that's a space where hyperscalers will struggle to keep up. Of course, they'll find ways to make their version of that thing, as they always do, but it'll come with a cost, and the cost is often more than the monetary cost. It comes, with your data sovereignty is not there. You don't know who's accessing the data behind the scenes or who's requested access to the data. So a lot of this stuff is not even an issue in the decentral world.
Hmm. Would you? It's obviously hard to predict the future, but would you care to maybe gauge a prediction of the next decade of this mass adoption? Do you think it's possible in that time frame?
Uh, I think in the next 10 years, we'll see some real serious players make a move in the decentral world, like ourselves included, if I can be a little bit egoistic there.
Absolutely.
But you're starting to see Cloudflare offer edge compute around the world. I think they have 5,000 locations around the world. So, it's distributed. Decentral by definition means non-ownership of the compute node that's part of the network. So they're distributed by default, but it's closer to decentralization than I think a lot of other players could do. So I really start to think edge is a growing space. It's a really strong growing space that the hyperscalers are offering solutions for it, but they're quite pricey. So if you look at the Snow family from Amazon, they can offer a lot of these things out at the edge, but you've just got to pay through the nose to get that service on site. So they're trying to solve it in a way, but again, if you have to pay the price that they're asking, it's a non-starter for a lot of businesses as compared to decentral networks, right? Because you could get similar compute capabilities or storage capabilities or even distribution capabilities much closer to you for, again, a fraction of the cost. And so I think this edge evolution is a guaranteed evolution of the internet, because I was involved in building these solutions in my last role. And I'm taking it even closer to the edge now in what we're doing now. So decentral, the options are all on the table of where is this got to be? Does the node have to be in a data center? Does it have to be in an office? Does it have to be on a campus? Does it have to be down the street from where the compute's needed and stuff like that? That's the options that are on the table for a decentral network.
Perfect. Awesome. Now I wanted to get to know a little bit more about yourself. And one thing about this podcast is that we like to cover the technical stuff and what businesses are doing, especially at the moment, debates about Web3. And I try to operate at the limits of my technical knowledge, but even a tech recruiter can struggle. But with yourself, you made the jump, was it more or less in 2021 with this venture? I can actually believe, I mean, if anyone's listening, we'll link the website and some stuff around Qubit 9. It's not been around long, and the traction, the noise, the sort of level of interest is quite staggering. How was that? Because you were really quite high up. You've held various different, director level positions in the tech world. What made you go for this?
So I had the chance to meet Kai and Christian, my co-founders here at Qubit 9, in I think October last year, November last year. Came down to literally the office I'm in right now. We had no staff. We had a recruiter and the other two founders, and they told me about their vision, about where they want to go. They're both very successful entrepreneurs in the past. I think between all of us, we've managed or had leadership positions in 4 or 5 unicorns already. And so meeting them was inspired. It was an inspiring moment. I think I came down for a 30-minute introductory meeting that turned into 4.5 hours. Like the sun had set, and we're sitting at the office still talking and riffing on ideas, which was amazing. And so I think we just clicked immediately. I knew of both of them because their successes at Good Game Studios in my own city, Hamburg. I eventually hired engineers from their group. When they sort of left their group, they came to us, some really good engineers. So they were well known in the tech space here in Germany, especially in Hamburg. But meeting them was like, yeah, amazing, great vision, really awesome people. And then for me, it was really clear this is where I wanted to be. And up until that time, I was saying to myself, well, you're going to leave the best job in your career so far for the most amazing opportunity that it's ever going to come across your desk. And so for me, it was like a no-brainer. We just agreed, yeah, this is where I want to be, and we took it from there. And so for me, it was just a very simple, a very simple decision with the vision that we had. Yes, we're in this for the long haul. This is not a like a flashbang type of company. We're in this
Mm.
for the long haul. We all gave up all of our other commitments. My other co-founders had seats on boards where they're major investors and so on and so forth. They retired all these seats just to focus on growing this company. We are operatively involved in the company every day. So no one's sitting here as an investor. We're actually running our departments, hitting our deliverables, aligning OKRs, all the stuff you do if you're a department head is what we're doing here every day. We're first in, last to leave, the three of us. It's an amazing feeling. It's really a startup feeling. The engineers are fantastic. And so we're really building a company in, I still feel like in the vision that we had in that first meeting when I met them. I was working with them from December last year. So coming up on a year now. We're about to promote to GA inside 12 months. We released in 9 to like an open beta, which is amazing. But yeah, here we are. And that's what drove me to make the change.
Perfect. And in your life in general, how's it been different? Because I mean, I'm sure you worked incredibly hard in your last company and in your high level roles. I found, I mean, maybe it's probably on a different scale, obviously, but I was a manager in my last company and then set up my own recruitment venture. And I can't even explain. It kind of feels different. The lines are blurred. You feel more one person in terms of work and life when you sort of have your own thing. But I'd be interested to get your take on that. How has the life changed for you?
So largely positively, I'll absolutely be clear on that to start with. That's that. Like if we had to cut the podcast right now, positive, really positive. Um, I think a founder never is off the clock. As a founder, you're never off the clock. So you're always worried about what can I do, what's going on. If a message comes through and you feel like I should act on this, there's no waiting until tomorrow. But this is all voluntary. This is what you signed
Mm,
up for. This is what you want to build, right? So no one is ever forcing me to do a thing. And in fact, sometimes it feels like there's not enough hours in a day to do all the things I want to do, not need to do, right? So there's never this I need to do this type feeling when you're an
mm,
employee. It's I want to do this because I know it's going to push us forward. So that's the first thing. The second thing for me personally, the last company I was working with, again, amazing people, really smart CEO, a great CTO that created basically Apache Mesos. Andreessen Horowitz backed company. It's in San Francisco. And so I essentially work 2 work days. I do the first part of my day managing all the engineers in Europe and hitting all the deliverables there, multiple teams. And then as that day would wind down, all my US engineers would come online and I'd be doing that. And then by the time it got to San Francisco, all the C levels would come online and I'd have to do all the updates, all the meetings there. And I'd be working 8 a.m. until 11 p.m. every day. Again, amazing people, amazing product, learned so much, enjoyed it. But here, because we're Hamburg based, like almost everyone, when we finish the day, we finish the day,
yeah.
right? And then anything else is up to me because I want to do the thing. And so on the personal side, I feel like I have more time back, but I'm working way more intensely as a founder, right?
Yeah.
And it's because I want to.
Yeah, this sort of I always like to dig into points of difference and work ethic as well, because even just like speaking to you, I remember when we had our first sort of preliminary chat. So anyone listening, we always get to know the guests before we're recording, and just speed of thought, the clarity and the quality of points put across is of a really high level. And you've mentioned about the hours you've done previously. Is this something that you've kind of always done in your career? This level of work ethic and intensity, or is it something
Yeah,
you've learned
I
along
think
the
I learned
way?
very young. I wasn't even 25 when I was working at which is now Iron Mountain, the Brambles Group, and I was working for a CIO in one of the divisions that was owned, and I did a project that got noticed by the group CIO, and he pulled me in to work for him without even meeting me. And he told the CEO, yeah, from next week, Daniel works for me. Too bad, type of thing. And so I went and met my new boss on the day I started working for him. And he was a tough taskmaster. Kudos to him. I think a lot of the stuff that I have in my work ethic was from him. He was a senior partner at Accenture, so like a really tough taskmaster. But learn a lot there on how to just be good and get better and never be satisfied with, like where you are. You always want to move the next big boulder and continue. And in a way, I've always sort of looked for bosses that would push me to be my best, my very best, without like jerk bosses, right? Like, so people
Yeah.
who can really hold you accountable, have the tough conversation with you when you're failing, help you navigate out of that sort of stuff. So searching leadership that would always hold me accountable and push me to be my best has been one of the success factors, I think, as well. Then I relocated to Germany from Australia because this was all in Sydney, Australia. Um, I was managing groups in Asia Pacific, Europe, and the Americas every day. And so you'd wake up super early and get all the meetings done and handoffs with Asia Pac. Then I'd probably have a little bit of a, because I was working remotely. I was the only senior global director not based in the US at the corporate level. So that was a big exception. And then I would do the regional stuff in Europe and then probably take a couple hour break, walk my dog or something like that, do some sport. And then I would do the same thing again for the Americas. So I'd have like 3 4 hour days in each region. Each region had their own directors and managers and teams and data centers and stuff like that. But someone had to be responsible for that globally, and that was me. And so picking up on that ethic of just, okay, I've got lots of things balancing at the same time, just to know your deliverables, to keep all your teams aligned. It was a learning path for me as well, but it worked in the end. And then moving into my last role, that was Iron Mountain, moving into the Mesosphere D2iQ roles, just bringing all that enterprise skill management. And that was something that they were looking for at that time as well, because they were growing from a small to medium sized startup into a much larger startup. And I think we had over 100 engineers at one point there before COVID. And so bringing that sort of enterprise process and discipline into it. And I got to the point where when I was the head of engineering there for a while, doing the refactor from 1.x to 2.x, and myself and a colleague got the prediction of the deliverable 6 months ahead down to the week. We could tell them down to the week when this would arrive, and we delivered in that week as well, right? And that was a really tough haul,
Wow.
tough 6 months. We did an interim release and then a major release after that, but pretty proud of being able to bring that rigor and discipline and planning into a startup, and be able to tell customers, hey, in this month it'll arrive, but we got it down to the week where we said it was. The field team and the sales team super happy with that deliverable, and all the signatures on contracts then happen and stuff like that. So these are sorts of things that startups have to learn or bring the skill in for as well.
Yeah. Amazing. But the stuff you say about managing people in different time zones, and that level of hours and intensity, like for many people, that would overwhelm them and burn themselves out. Did you ever find that? How are you dealing with that? Because I talk to a lot of founders on the podcast, and people seem to have different stories, and ways of dealing with that issue.
Yeah, I've never faced burnout. Again, having really good leaders above you that teach you how to manage your own time, your own deliverables. And I think one of the things that a lot of people in a leadership position, or even just like a governance position, or even just like as an individual contributor, don't do is say no. And I think the biggest success, the most successful people know what to say no to, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to be aware of, okay, is this value add? Is this for me to do? Can I delegate it? Does it even need to be done? If it is, today. So learning the skill of saying no is often one of the things that a lot of leaders can't grasp, because then you start to take on too much and you fail at the things that are really important for your organization, right? And what you try and do then is find the slack time to do it, which then encroaches on your personal time, right?
Mm.
And so having priorities of what you have to deliver and knowing what to say yes to, what to say no to, and then the yeses come in different categories as well, like yes immediately, yes I'll get it done by the due date, or yes I'll have to get someone on my team to do that. And these are some of the things of like it's essentially either saying no or letting go. To delegate is a very important thing. I mean, the Eisenhower matrix is a very simple tool to help you navigate that. So important and urgent, urgent and important, or don't do. You can use that to map out your priorities. The other thing is another really cool trick that one of my bosses way back taught is stop, start, continue. So I like to reflect on my week every Friday and look at the activities I did for the week. What have I completed? What I haven't completed? And start to look at, okay, what should I start doing? What should I stop doing? And what should I continue doing? So start what you feel needs to start, either a process, a task, or a way of working. Stop what's not adding value to you or the organization, and continue what's really working well. Right? These are three things that really help in a reflection moment.
Perfect. So is that like called anything, or is that just a something that
It's
you've
just
been
called stop,
taught?
start, continue.
Stop, start, continue.
Yeah.
I might implement that because
Yeah.
it's so easy to waste time
Yeah,
and
like
to
every Friday, I go home, have that cup of tea, at the breakfast bench, looking out in my garden there. And my wife's probably in the lounge room there with me, and I just look through my calendar. I look through my tasks that I completed and what's still outstanding, and then I just put some notes on the side. And then Monday morning, you enact what you decided to stop doing, start doing, and continue. You just keep doing.
yeah. But even to do that takes discipline to do these sort of thought exercises on a Friday, whatever, after a massively long work week.
Yeah.
Um, this sort of discipline, it seems like, I mean, I've seen your trajectory in your career and you've done a hell of a lot. I don't know how I'm going to record the intro because there's a lot I need to cover in it. Where's that discipline come from? Again, is that something that you've always had, or is that developed over time?
I think it's a combination of a few things. Like growing up, my father was a very competitive person, and he taught me to be a very competitive person for all the good and bad that has done in my life. The other thing is I took up martial arts very early. So I started doing martial arts. I think I was 14, 13 or 14. I started doing martial arts. Um, I received 5 different black belts from different groups and clubs before I switched to doing another martial art, which is a little bit alternative. Capoeira. It's from Brazil.
Yeah. Is that
I'm
the acrobatics?
Yes, yes. And so I've been doing that for close to 25 years now, that one. My next grading is to master. There's nothing higher than that after the master grading. So I'm called what's called a contra mastery. It's one against the master. I teach martial arts 3 times a week, and I do a fourth session myself to train. So on top of being a founder and running a startup, I carve out the time for what's important for me, and that's why that whole start, start, continue, and learning what's not adding value to do is very important. So life balance is very important. This job is a marathon. I'm not here in a startup to sprint to the finish line. This is going to be 2, 3, 5, 8 years to be super successful at scale. And so we're in this for the long run. So you have to look after yourself. You have to make sure you've got the right mindset, the right health, the right focus. But having done martial arts now for probably over 30 years, I don't want to give away my age, over 30 years for sure, teaches you a lot about self discipline and drive, because you show up to class every day, you get shouted at to do hard exercises or be punched or kicked or whatever. Um, and you pay for the privilege as well, right? So, like,
Mm.
the discipline is to go back and face your fears and face the hard moments all the time. And then I guess it became part of my DNA. I've been teaching now, I've been teaching martial arts for over 25 years. So I have 3 different cities in Germany where I have teachers. I teach my own classes as well. And I think we have over 100 students in Germany. And so you know, 2 nights ago, I was teaching in Germany. I had 30 students in the room, and I'm teaching them how to do kicks and how to do falls and stuff like that. A few weeks before that, I drove to another city and went into probably the best way to call it is like a fight night. You go into a circle and you get challenged by all these people without going into too much detail. And these moments are tough. They're hard. You have to train for them, and you need the discipline to always prepare yourself for these moments. And I think taking a lot of that out of capoeira martial arts into my day to day at the office, I don't see the difference, right?
Mm.
Challenging moments, you have to prepare yourself for these always. when you fall or you get hit, you have to reflect and learn and see, how do I do better? So it's a growth mindset. It's a prepared to fail mindset always, and not have a problem with failing, especially if you're pushing boundaries, right? And we do push boundaries here. And one of the things I reassure all the engineers is, I got a super high tolerance for failure, like, because we're pushing the edge and we're going to make mistakes, and we know that. Um, I don't like repeat mistakes, so let's learn,
Mm.
right? Because it reinforces, yes, we are here to take risk, and I do want you to learn from mistakes, right? I want a growth mindset. So these are two of the things that have always been part of me, I guess, in general. But it's just been reinforced through over 30 years of martial arts and putting that into practice every day in my job.
Doing hard things
Yeah,
on purpose.
yeah, pretty much to make
Yeah,
the actual hard things seem easy, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's something. Yeah, it's. I mean, it's obviously showing my. So I've just turned 28,
right.
and I'm at the age now where yeah, you start to even at late 20s where you can't get away with stuff that you used to in terms of health and fitness and things like that. I've played rugby all my life,
Yeah,
and that's been great as like switching off from work, and that's the same with you where I feel like if you go for a long run, you can still think about stuff.
yeah.
But if you're in combat sport or rugby or whatever, it's the only thing you can
It's
think
it's
about is what is in front of you.
it's not for everyone, these types of sports, and I'm
Mm.
not a thrill seeker by any measure. But it is important that people have something for them outside the
Mm.
office that they really connect to, that either enhances their life or helps them do what they want to achieve in life. And that could be something very simple, or that could be something very complex. As long as it doesn't harm you and it does the right things for your spirit and for your mindset, and some people need something to help them get into the thinking mindset or to the meditation mindset. Other people need to just burn off all that frustration. All these things are valid things to pursue in life outside the office, as long as, like, it doesn't compromise you as a person. And I think you should always put your health first, because you need to be your best self in a job like this.
Mm. Absolutely. Wise words. And sometimes I think maybe for younger founders out there,
Mhm.
or even just people in the working world, that can be sometimes hard advice to take because I don't know, I can only speak from my experience, but when I was, say, 21, 22, and I was starting out, I thought I was running out of time. Um,
Mm,
and, but obviously that's not the case. And it is a marathon, as you said.
absolutely.
Uh, super, super interesting. And in terms of like this mindset and this work ethic and like this discipline, do you think ever give yourself time to pat yourself on the back, maybe celebrate these wins, let your hair down? Because from what I can see from you at the moment, and I know this like the we're on a podcast and I'm asking you specific questions, but it seems remarkable the work rate, what you're doing, the intensity, the discipline to do all these amazing things. Um, but what about when you slack on something or you just need to let your hair down? Is there a side to you in that, or are you this robot?
No, I'm not a robot by any measure. I'm, like, I may look really serious. I know that's one of my physical flaws, I guess. I'm pretty easygoing. I enable my teams to make decisions. We always coordinate, like, and align on what those outputs need to look like. But I guess I like to share success and own failure. And so when the team if an engineer on the team has a success, it's their success. Like, I want to point it out, what an amazing job they did. Hey, look what engineer X or Y accomplished this week. Let's put it in this week's product update as a demo. Amazing. And if there's a problem in the team or we drop the ball, then that's on me, right? And so, like, that's one of the things that I do. The other thing is, holding two truths in my mind at the same time, and this is a little bit from the martial arts thing, is I know we can deliver something on time or even ahead of time and under engineering budget and so on and so forth. And so I think, wow, I did amazing. Like, that's the best I've ever done, but I can do better. right? And so but adding that, but I can do better is where I want to improve, where I want to grow, where I want to find out, okay, let's do that start, stop, continued on that amazing thing we did. Could it be better? Like, what can we do next time to make it cheaper, faster, leaner,
Mm.
less complex, wow the customer even more? But of course, there's moments where you're just super proud of an achievement. And I think everyone wants validation for good work, right? And so I might say to another founder, "Hey, we did this," and like the boss will be, "Oh, amazing! We came up with this amazing solution that reduced the networking overhead by 25x." And he was super happy with that, and like so I got really happy with that as well, right? And so I'm like, okay, cool, because that was actually my work, my own personal work, right?
Mm.
Spent the weekend redesigning data center network and just lowered that overhead, and I was super happy with the result, but I didn't realize how impactful that would be to us as a business, right? And so once my boss pointed it out to me, the CEO Kai, then I realized, okay, that's amazing, right? And so I was proud for like a day, but then you don't want to let it feed your ego. So like it's time to say,
Yeah,
how could I do better, right? And there's enough challenges here on our radar to always keep my head out of the clouds and into the problems that's okay. How do we do better?
fantastic.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you as well is what's your relationship and attitude and awareness to stress? Something we all have, and something I've asked a lot of guests. And as
Yeah.
a founder, there's plenty of opportunities to be stressed. So I'd love your take on that.
There's lots of serious moments here in our startup. Like there's lots of things to do. I don't think I display stress. I don't think I even feel it. Like if you go back to what I said earlier about these challenging situations that I'm in sport and stuff like that, it puts things into a controlled perspective. And of course, you don't diminish the seriousness of any situation at the office. It's not diminished, but it doesn't have that physical impact that stress has. Of course, you say, let's jump into a room, or let's stay late and solve this problem, or how can I support the initiative, right? I know that. So like, hey, you're doing this thing in another domain that I can't help with. How can I support? Right? Like I want to get into this. I want to share the load. And when deliverables are coming down to the line, to be super clear, to be super objective, to reflect on what was meant to be delivered. Where's the gap, and where do you fix the problem? How do you then again stop, start, continue? How do you learn from this in the future so you don't get into this situation again? Um, at the start of my career, this was world ending when something was missed on a deliverable or a service was
Mm.
out or a data center went offline and you didn't know why. Like this is like the worst situation. And then you start to get these things under control. You start to learn the processes and how to handle these situations better as a person. Like if we're talking personally, and to realize, okay, I can manage this problem. I know how to do this. We prep for this. There's a process in place. And so I think a lot of the stress comes from not knowing or not having the tools to personally handle the stress and not having the tools professionally to know how to navigate a stressful situation. And I think those two things can help a lot of young founders to say, okay, how do I make sure that I separate myself from the situation and just be my best professional self in the situation, right? It's not a personal thing, it's a professional thing. And so I need to be better professionally so we didn't end up in these places, right? And that's the bridge back to the personal where you need to have the growth mindset. What can I do better?
Mm.
And maybe you were doing your best and something just like a curveball came your way, right? Learn from that, like have a process for that next time. Make sure the team understands how to handle that. When a team is working really well and tightly together in an emergency, once you're through that, there's no better feeling.
Yeah.
Like being in an emergency situation, everyone just plays the right part and you solve the problem, or you get over that hump of the nightmare, and it's 11 p.m. and everyone goes home. You're coming the next day smiling like, wow, like how did we pull that off? Right. So I think also realizing you're not alone and rely on your team as well in these moments.
Very interesting. Have you found over the years, have you seen that as a differentiator to people who have maybe progressed in their career or built companies? Because there's some that argue that stress resistance is a real skill and can really separate people and their achievements in their lives. I don't know if you had any
Probably,
observations on
probably.
that.
I mean, if stress is a bad experience for you, then you tend to be risk adverse.
Mm.
And then taking on new challenges and being an entrepreneur is maybe not the space for you to operate in. If you have a real problem with stress, I don't want to offend any listeners that have a real personal problem with stress and they're an entrepreneur, right? That's fine. Like it's on them. I guess I want to say is being an entrepreneur is tough. It comes with a lot of stress, and you need to either be able to be okay with that stress because that's what you signed on for, or have tools to navigate that stress, or have outlets to reduce and release that stress. If you don't have one of these three things, or a combination of all of them, if you don't have any of these, you're not going to succeed. You're going to suffer, or you're going to avoid situations that are challenging that could really bring you and your company forward.
Yeah, I think as well in these sort of shifting market, there'll be founders listening. I know quite a lot of founders tune in, or just people stressed about things that are out of their control at
Yeah,
the moment as the market slides. And one thing that's really helped me is, I think when COVID hit, obviously I'm in the recruiting space. So when COVID hit, um, basically recruiting stopped for like 2 months throughout the whole world as everyone was going. And what I found was that people were trying to just outwork the shifting tide of the market. So the analogy I use is that, if you fall into the sea, you don't try and swim against the current because eventually you'll just get drowned. You have to kind of go with it and work out a way to duck and weave and land on the other side. And that sort of analogy for me has really helped. It sort of regains an element of control over a situation where there's so many things that are out of your control.
yeah, a little bit, and it's always trying to like. And I can't like I'm not in other people's shoes, and I know the lockdown was disastrous for so many people. Like it's really, I personally know people that had a really tough time with this. Um, so for me, I think in a way you're right. I think it's trying to also find the opportunity in the disaster. So
Mm,
don't let the emergency be an emergency. Look for the opportunity in the emergency, right? Like what, like you said, should I swim with it? Should I find a floating piece of wood? I don't know how to bring the analogy further, but the point is, if you have that mindset of how do I navigate through this disaster, or what's the opportunity within this disaster, then you have that problem solving mindset of always saying, okay, a bad problem should be also presenting up to an equal opportunity for us to take advantage of this, right? And that's where this whole disaster mitigation and working as a team comes into play, because then you feel great once you've gotten through that, and you've probably done something unique that could set your startup aside from others.
absolutely. Before we wrap up, I know you're busy and pressed for time, and can come across as a bit of a wishy-washy question, but we always like to look to the future. When it is all said and done, and you're sort of downing your tools, or you don't have to go through kind of strategies for the business, but where are you going with this? Is there an end goal, or are you just enjoying the passage of time, as they say?
You talking about my company or personally?
Both your personal sort of business and career objectives, life objectives, your standard for when all's said and done, you're looking back, what are you going to be happy with?
I think the business, we're in this for the long run. No one's trying to do anything fast and flashy here. We know, like I said, this is a marathon. We want to build a successful business. We want to build a decentralized cloud platform. That's clear to us. That's our vision. We're starting with storage. I'm here for the long run on that. Absolutely. That's what we want to do. For me personally, it's not about ego. It's not about having your name in books and newspapers and being on television. It's about contributing something meaningful to this space, right? And to look back and say, okay, I did no harm and I did really good stuff, and I can see the impact of my work, in my life or even on the planet. It sounds a little bit egoistic to say it that big, but at the scale we're talking about of the platform we're trying to build here at Qubit 9, I think that's a reasonable assumption that once we're successful, I can look back and say, okay, I noticed a positive change from being here, right? And I think that's the ultimate goal for me. And even in my private space of teaching martial arts, my goal is to teach this art to people and help them have better lives because of it. And I see that impact daily. I've been teaching for 20 years and I haven't accepted a cent for teaching. So I do this for free for 20 years now. And essentially, I just want to pass on this art and have people, like, enrich people's lives through this. So I guess I have that mindset in general. Of course, I want to be successful in the business for sure. That's why I'm here. I want to take on the big cloud providers. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, I also want to make this place a better place for everyone. I guess, like, as part of that, like, wishy washy question, wishy washy answer. I guess,
No, absolutely. And on that note, I think there's no better way to end the podcast. So, Daniel, thank you so much for that, for your
Alex,
wisdom on the Web3 space and yourself as well. Amazing.
really
Amazing.
great to chat to you again. Thanks very much, and stay in touch.
Absolutely.